Okay, just stand in for a few moments just to establish your basic stance that we use for a good proportion of the exercises, and which illustrates really the sort of inequalities of posture that we're trying to reproduce in all stances and in all the exercises. It's most simply done like this, of course. Feet are hip width apart so that your shoulders and hips are more or less in a line with your feet. Toes pointing forwards, or if that's uncomfortable for some reason, can be slightly turned out, but not so far that it sort of sends your attention, as it were, in different directions. So everything is really focused towards one particular direction to begin with, although we also want to gradually develop a sense of all-round awareness. But from a physical point of view, everything is sort of there. That's where I'm going. So if you're watching this on your computer screen, then you can imagine that your hips and your shoulders are parallel to the screen. From the side, your weight is slightly forwards. So 70% of your weight in the front half of your feet, roughly speaking, I would say. And since this gives you a slight sense of being angled forwards, and so a gradual growing sense that you'll be pulled backwards and pulled around by gravity, then we simply neutralize that by allowing our hips to drop back. Soften your knees. Your knees will bend slightly, but I find it's best not to think about bending your knees, because the real purpose of the whole process that we call rooting down is to drop your center of gravity. So if we assume the center of gravity is around about here, it's that area and the hips that we want to drop down. And we refer to it as sitting. So like if you're going to sit in the chair, you wouldn't necessarily think about where you're bending your knees. You think about where the chair was in relation to your hips, and so on and so forth. And this is the stance that we start everything from. We begin to build on that. So to begin with, just turning in the center part of your body, the area between hips and waist is what I mean when I refer to the center. And you can see the turn there. If I put one hand on my belly there, you can see the movement. To start off with, just see the movement in your arms as incidental. They're moving because you're turning in your hips, and the turning in your hips moves your ribs move your shoulders, and so on. And this order of movement, this process that starts with your center and or your feet, because the two are very much related, as you'll see in a few moments, is consistent throughout the practice. So it's not that our arms are unimportant, but arms and hands are said to express the movement that builds up through the rest of your body, in much the same way as if you're on the beach and you see the waves crashing in on the beach. That energy of the waves has built up over far back. The initial sort of impetus for the wave began. I don't know how far that would be. Probably varies according to the shore and all sorts of things. So the visible part of Tai Chi is really, I wouldn't say it's the least important, but I would suggest it's a bit like the tip of an iceberg. There's a whole 90% below the surface that we're trying to recognize and to understand and to work with. So this requires a readjustment of our thoughts and how we view movement working through the body, getting a sense for what's going on within your body rather than just copying what's happening outside your body, as it were. Although, of course, being able to follow the movements is an important element in learning, but we use the external movement to direct our attention to what's happening within the body to begin with. And then after a while, so that anybody watching this with a bit more experience, you can begin to reverse that process, that by working with the movements within your body, and this is where our attention and our intention becomes very important, we actually start to produce the external movements. It's a little bit black and white, to be honest. It's a bit more nuanced than that, but it's a useful way to think of this. And a nice steady rhythm build. Feel the play of the movements, maybe perhaps the muscles of your back, for instance, or the chest, so that we get used to focusing our attention inwards. And so, you know, I often say to people, it really is best to think of these movements not so much as an exercise form, but as a moving meditation. You will get your exercise because you're moving, but it's really one of the distinguishing factors in Tai Chi, which is the degree of focus of attention and intention, and how we essentially cultivate that mind-body overlap. So at the moment, your arms and shoulders and hands very, very loose, just following the movement. Now we're going to take this movement and give it more of a shape, very simple shape. Just turn your hands up, and hands are palm up, roughly in line with your shoulder, no higher than your shoulder, maybe lower. Notice that my elbow is hanging down, and just trying to maintain that shape with your arms without tightening in big muscles of your arms and your shoulders, so that you begin to get a sense of movement through your body again, that no one part of your arm is actually straining to maintain the position, but rather you're using the whole of your arm, the different muscles and tendons and fascia and bone and so on and so forth. So this is a very holistic approach to movement. We may well break movements down and look at different parts of the body at times, but ultimately the idea is to bring every part into one unified whole. Drop your hands down. Now put one foot forwards. Keep the width of your step. Take the step about as long, maybe a little bit longer, and begin to move your weight forwards and backwards. Now, if you look at my stance, my front foot, again, pointing straight ahead. My back foot is turned out. So the tendency as you move your weight will be with the center of your body to turn. And again, we can see how the feet, legs with the movement of your weight and the center of your body interact with each other and begin to guide and to shape what's happening in the upper part of your body. So as well as being just useful to move a little bit faster, to warm your body up, to get the blood circulating a bit more freely, so on and so forth, as in any kind of physical warm-up exercise, there's a number of things going on in these initial exercises that we want to try and bring into our practice. So these faster exercises make a very good morning practice. They're gently aerobic, only very mildly, but things like the rhythm and the flow and the momentum of the movement are perhaps a little bit more clear to you, a little bit more accessible than they are in some of the slower movements. And then on the other side. Again, check your stance. There's just space, cross my legs. If I do it like this, then I'm going to feel as though I'm on a tight rope or a narrow bridge, and I'm going to start wobbling around. We do use different stances, as I said. We use narrow stances and so on and so forth at times. But again, what we're trying to do is to begin to establish basic principles and an awareness of how our body feels when we're in tune with those basic principles. And then shake out. So coming back to the first stance, this time the knees will bend a little bit more, but again, try and think more about what's happening in your hips. Just be aware of this area, hips, lower back, buttocks, overhanging slightly. You can see there, just that slight curve in my knees. Now, let the hips drop back a little bit more. And go to the top position, don't lock the knees back. And then let your hips drop down again. See if you can feel the push that comes from your legs as a result. You think about if you're in water and you get a ball and you push the ball down, and you feel an increasing movement upwards coming from the buoyancy of the water. Eventually the ball would get pushed up. The same thing here, there's a kind of response in your legs and your feet that eventually overcomes the pull of gravity. And then at the other end, the momentum of that, the energy rising, sort of fades away and gravity takes over and pulls you down. So there's two movements here. One is the sinking down, the yielding to the pull of gravity. And then there's that rise in expanding energy. We're rooting down is the term. When we drop down, we want to get a feeling of our center of gravity beginning to settle into the ground. And when we push up, it's not lifting the center of gravity again, literally called the root. So it's like a plant will grow out of the seed. So your body contracts and then expands. Your arms are obviously moving up and down, so we're now going to bring our arms in with a simple shape as though you're cradling the ball. You sink down, and as you push up, your body expands, pushing your elbows out. You turn your hands over, let your hips sink, feel your shoulders going down, and it's as though you're pushing the ball down into water. So this is the exercise rooting down, body expanding, contracting. And again, this rhythm of expansion and contraction is consistent through the movements that we do here. Consistent in Tai Chi. Mostly what we do here is exercises that have a very regular rhythm. That's not always the case in Tai Chi, but again, we're looking to familiarize ourselves with this two-part movement, not as two separate parts, but as two parts of the same whole. Yin Yang. So Yang would be the extending stage, Yin the contracting stage. So the rooting down is the first key physical principle that we look to establish. The lower your center of gravity, the more you release the energy. The more you release the energy, the more you expand. The more you expand, the more you release. The more you release, the more you expand. 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 The the less likely you are to strain, the more stable you will be. And that is very much linked in with the alignment of your body. If I'm leaning backwards, for instance, and I bend my knees, I'm just going to fall backwards. So we align ourselves with the pull of gravity working through our body. And by allowing our hips to sink, we allow gravity to pull down our center of gravity rather than forcing ourselves down. Next exercise is the wild goose, using the same action in legs and feet. And this has the image of the bird in flight. And as I said earlier, we used a lot of imagery, Tai Chi, and we just observe our body's responses to the individual exercises. If they offer something useful, and we maintain the image as much as possible. Our bodies have a natural response to imagery in any case, and again, this is one of the qualities that we deliberately cultivate in Tai Chi. These are intentional movements. You try not to let your attention drift off into the ether. It will do so. When it does, just learn to bring your attention back. And perhaps that could be seen also as a reflection of this rhythm of expansion and contraction, yang to yin to yang to yin. Both are important, but we don't want our thoughts to sort of drift away too far and start wondering what we're doing this evening and how we're going to get the Christmas shopping done and so on and so forth. And then third variant here, put your hands crossed in front of your belly. This is part in the clouds. Push up. Not a stretch up, just a gentle circle out and then down. And again, expanding and contracting. You may find that your breathing naturally follows that rhythm. If it doesn't mean that it's wrong. And you shouldn't be trying to strain to keep to a particular breathing pattern or method, even if it's one that you think that you know. Just let your breath come naturally, and you'll find it will naturally harmonize with posture and movements most of the time. One more time. Your arms drop down. And again, you can keep this up and down movement in your hips if you wish. Push up on one side, expanding on one side. At the top of the movement, wind your fingers around, rotate your arm and pull down. This is called Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. Change to the other side. Don't rush the changeover. Push up, wind around, pull down. One more time. Just stand for a moment, again letting your hands drop down. And again, come closer so you can see a bit easier, the sense of dropping there. So what that means is when you drop in this way, you're allowing gravity free passage through your body. And because you've dropped down but haven't collapsed, hopefully, then there was obviously some kind of response through your body that it's not as a hard resistance, but eventually pushes up. And when we're in this position here, we're sort of in a neutral position that the pull of gravity downwards is matched by the response in your body. And it's sometimes referred to as being suspended between heaven and earth. In other words, you're held between these two forces that act on your body. And for the next couple of exercises, we maintain that position and sort of try and pick up on the sense of internal movement. So into this position, weight a little bit forwards, hips dropping back, bringing your hands to your sides. So then as though you were following the upward movement, let your hands push up just a little bit above your head in front of your body, as though you're just placing your palms of your hands on a low ceiling. And then letting your elbows drop down, letting gravity bring your hands back down to the starting position. Then lift again, but this time your elbows drop down more quickly, and that means that you end up pushing out to the sides. You notice my elbow is hanging down, palms facing out, and then again. And just do a few of those, alternating from one to the other, taking your time, making sure that you fully complete each stage of the movement. Means your hands coming back down to this position beside your hips before you start the next stage. Remember this time. So one of the attributes, I think, for the physical posture is that it creates a bit of space within your body. And at the same time, the focusing of your attention into the movements that you're doing and their subtleties just settles your thoughts, creates a bit of space in your thoughts. It can be very easy with this to sort of do this, and then you get to here, and suddenly it's like, oh, I've got to go down here, to sort of like dash ahead, but start running down a slope. If you don't put the brakes on somehow, it's going to get more difficult. And push out, and this time turn just a little bit in your hips. Notice how that changes the direction that your hands are pushing in. Turn back. Turn the other way. And back. Notice that your hands come back to that same central part of your body. And then finish with the sideways push straight out, looking forwards. 4 stages now we've got. Each one starting and finishing here. So you expand out from your center and you contract back in. Push out sideways and turn and come back. Turn the other way and back. And then facing the front and pushing out. And back. Pushing in 4 directions. First direction. Second, just turning in the center of your body. The other way. And then looking ahead, pushing outside. One more round. And then keeping the same stance. This time on the expanding stage, one arm swings out and up, again slightly in front of your body until it's in line with your nose, and then straight down. And then adding the turn, so you get to here, and if it's comfortable, you turn and drop your hand down. Quite a strong turn, that one. So if there's any sense of pulling on your hips or your back, I suggest you just do it without the turn to begin with. And see if you can drop your hips more, get that feeling of releasing of the tightness and stiffness in your body, the resistance to the pull of gravity. You create more space for the turn. And then changing sides. And then add in the turn. And then just bringing your arms around. And this time, see if you can just let the movement die away gently. Come back to this standing position. 70% of your weight in the front half of your feet. That slight tendency to feel as though you're being pulled forwards, neutralized by your hips dropping back. Suspended between heaven and earth. And shake out. So all of those movements, and in fact, probably the majority of them, well, easily the majority of the movements that we use in Tai Chi are looking to maintain that upright line with the pull of gravity. So if I show you with this, for instance, this represents the midline of my body. Obviously it doesn't, it's not the actual midline, but it would look something like this. It would be in the middle of my body, and it would be roughly in that position. And as I sink down and push up, I try to maintain that position, not sort of leaning forwards or tilting my head back or anything like that. The next two exercises, we're going to change that. And what we're going to do is, as we sink down, we push your hips back. Now you can see what happens is, of course, my head and shoulders go forwards. But what we're not doing is this. So the main action is once again in the center part of the body, hips going back. This is a vertical rotation this time in that central part of the body. And because of that, our shoulders and our head and eventually our arms will go forwards. And then to bring ourselves back to the upright, don't pull up in your head and neck, rather let your hips drop back down, let gravity pull your hips down, and notice how that brings your head up. It's almost like if you could imagine here with the pole, got one end sticking there. If I move the bottom of the pole there, it sends the top of the pole forwards. This is the pivot point. And then if I want to bring the top up, if I push down there, it springs up nice and easy. Whereas if that's the heavy end and I'm trying to lift it up, it becomes quite a strain. Think of a seesaw. Put a child on one end of the seesaw, and then you press down on the opposite end, and it's that which lifts the child. So this is quite a strong movement in back and knees. So please be careful with the next two exercises, but both of which employ this idea. So you start to sink down, push your hips back. Notice how the head comes forward. You don't have to go this far. Just a little movement is fine. And then letting your hips drop back, coming to the upright and pushing. So 3 stages. 1, going down. 2, coming to the upright. 3, pushing up. 1, 2, and 3. Almost like you're going to get a bowl and put it into water, and then scoop the water into your pelvis and push up. Now, this time, your arms follow. This is called rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Again, be careful of overextending. It's not the case that bigger movements are necessarily better. Quite often it's the smaller movements that allows the spaciousness to be aware of what's happening within your body. So for instance, if you're not straining in your back, which you shouldn't be, then this is a gentle lengthening through your spine rather than a stiffening up in your shoulders. So, it's not that we're unconcerned with the range of movement, it's just about how we work with it. This time, let your hands rest in front of your hips, turn, push your hips back, so now your hands are projected forwards, turn again, so they're drawn around in a circular fashion and back again. This is called polishing the table. So both of these movements that we've been doing, the last ones, really illustrate how what's happening in the center part of our body influences certainly the upper body, but also lower body in all sorts of planes of movement, both horizontal and vertical. Position table one more time. And then stand it. Shake out. So if we're thinking about the posture, given this sense of space that enables the flowing movements, because without that space, it's very difficult to get the flow, both internally and externally. We have to think in terms of our stance, our posture being, first of all, in line with the pull of gravity. In theory, if not in practice, I could take this pole that I was using to represent my center line, and arrange it so that it didn't fall over. In practice, that's very difficult. But the theory is, if it's in line, then actually it's just going to stay there. But of course it doesn't. So lining up with the pull of gravity is very important. Dropping your center of gravity is very important. If I gave you a heavy box or weight and said hold it up above your head and then relax your shoulders, that would be very difficult. But if you held it down there, it would come much more simply. So rooting down gives you the stability. It also means less of a burden for much of the body, not trying to hold yourself up, straining in your shoulders and so on. And then very specifically, we learned with those last two exercises that actually it needn't be a struggle to come into the upright position. And this, I think, is one of the great things about the outcome of the Tai Chi posture, is this lovely sense of openness and spaciousness again within our body. When we realize that we don't have to strain and get into a fight with the pull of gravity through our shoulders. So we're not trying to sort of hold ourselves up by our head or by our shoulders. We learn to trust our legs again. We learn to allow gravity, the force that would have pulled us over, to bring us to the upright position. And we see that very clearly, I think, in those last two exercises. So this is something that we pays practice. To maintain that posture is difficult, because a lot of what I'm saying goes against our habitual ways of moving and standing. You just have to sort of replace the old habits with new habits, with practice, and get used to the idea that it's okay not to stiffen up, not to strain, and so that this idea of releasing brings us into a good posture, offers much greater stability. Effectively, we get good posture by relaxing, not straining, which is counterintuitive to begin with. Now we're going to change the stance. I said earlier that we were facing the computer screen. This time, turn your left foot out to between 30 and 40 degrees, probably. It will vary. Step straight forward with your other foot. Toes are pointing forwards. And keep the width of your step. Like this again, you'll start to feel as though you're bouncing on a tightrope. Whereas here, you got the width and about the same in length. It's not a huge stride, but it's not too short. And what you're going to do is you just begin to transfer your weight from one foot to another. So when we were in the vertical postures, we sank down. We felt that response from the body pushing us up. What happens now is the same idea. We go into our back leg, we get a feeling of dropping through the back leg. We feel the push up coming from the leg, but instead of letting it push us up, it takes us forwards. And then similarly, we settle into the front leg, and then we let it push us back. So this is a very important exercise for a number of reasons. We'll see how it develops. If you haven't done this before, in a few moments. It helps to condition your legs. It's very good for your legs. And it helps us to understand how we can take those principles I was talking about previously, the rooting down, the stability that comes from that, the freedom of movement that we get when that happens, and so on and so forth, into a stance that is more dynamic and that can lead into walking and further movements. It's a very good exercise for knees. Try and just soften your knee as you go forwards. Allow the feeling of movement downwards and upwards through your leg to pass through your knee without getting in its way. So at the moment, you'll be getting about 60% of your weight in the front leg. You settle in, and then when you go back, you may get a little bit more because the foot is turned out and the hip is open, maybe as much as 70. But now go into your front foot and imagine somebody pushing your back knee in. And what happens is the knee starts to be pushed in. You get a stronger feeling of dropping in this rear hip and buttock, and your heel comes up, and more of your weight settles into your front foot. When you go back, it's the same sort of idea. You go into your back foot, hip drops, and that draws, go from the side. You're dropping down seems to draw your front toes up. More of your weight goes into your back foot. Try not to lean. So maintain that line with the pull of gravity as you go through your body, through your weight change. If I'm here, I'll hold this up and then it goes with me. I can do this. Raise the heel. If I start doing this, if I raise the heel and I'm like this, then I'm already starting to fall. So we're learning to move whilst we're in line with and yielding to the pull of gravity. With hips and shoulders, hips and pelvis and shoulders remain level. And then eventually what we can do is we can bring the foot in, extend out, put the heel down, lower the toes. You can have the foot slightly turned out at this point because the back heel comes up. And again, with the foot a little bit turned out, it helps to open up your hip, but it's only a little bit, it's not right out there. The basic direction of movement is forwards and backwards. And so we're trying to just contract the leg and the other leg and really pretty much the rest of our body just work together to maintain our stability. One of the reasons we take a slightly shorter than normal step is to help us understand how that is possible. If it was a longer step, then you would need to lean and it could get to be a bit of a struggle. And this time, depending on which direction you've got space, I'm going to go forward, you take a step forward. Now this is as though you're walking on thin ice. You put the heel down, you lower the toes, you sort of press in to test the ice before you move your weight. It's another reason why we take a slightly shorter step, because here, if I push in, if I felt that the ice wasn't going to take my weight, I could bring my foot back. If I've fallen in, I'll go straight through. If you're going backwards, the step is the other way around. You put the ball of the foot down first and then the heel, but the rest principle remains the same. I'm now going to go back, put the ball of the foot down, lower your heel, move your weight. Good. Now, try the same set of movements with your other foot forward. So turn your right foot out, step forward with your left foot. Here is fixed step. Don't go straight into the stepping. Give yourself time to build this up. Each stage of this process is very important. Remember, sinking down or settling onto your back foot and then your front foot. Feeling the response in your leg. Letting that response begin to move you, and really, directing the movement with your intention through the center part of your body. So you could imagine a curve almost from the front foot, pushing up into the center of your body, across and then down like an archway. And then the same idea going forwards. Great exercise for the legs, great exercise if you struggle with mobility issues of one kind or another, and a crucial exercise in the Tai Chi system. Now you can begin to settle in a little bit more, raise toes and heel in the way that I described. Remember, this is associated with your hips dropping. And then stepping in. And we plant the foot and then move the weight. And then step through whichever direction you have the space to do so. Forwards or backwards, doesn't matter which way you start. And with that feeling of dropping through your hips, of allowing gravity to pull your hips down, to pull your center of gravity down, rather than getting into a fight with this overwhelming force that we live with all our lives. Change direction. And this quality of yielding to the overwhelming force is something that very much relates to the martial aspect of Tai Chi. So this is actually potentially quite a powerful idea. Good, and then shake. So now have your right foot forwards. We're going to bring the arms back into the movement, but try not to lose that sense of what's happening in your legs and your feet. So going forwards and letting your arms trail behind until you settle into the front foot, and they swing through a little bit, and then going back. Same idea. This is called fisherman cast the net. It's like a wave flowing through your body very smoothly and freely. It's a very good exercise to practice. It's a very simple exercise, very lovely exercise actually. And again, as you get more familiar with it, you just begin to notice and pay attention to the changes within your body. One more time, going forwards, and this time as you go back, you let your hands swing across your body, you turn your body, your arms swing up in a curve, and then forwards and down. And the hands come across your hip. So you're making this sort of sideways figure of 8, mostly by moving your weight and by turning in the center of your body. Okay, and shake it. Have your other foot forward. So start with fisherman past the net. We're told in Tai Chi the movement is rooted in the feet, so we maintain posture the whole way through. Not letting our arms overextend, not leaning forwards or backwards. Movement, the energy is transmitted through our legs, in this instance with the transfer of the weight and that sense of compression and expansion that we experience in the legs. Directed by the center of the body, the area between hips and waist. So this time, as you go into your back foot, you turn, and that redirects the arms, reshapes the arms, and expressed in our arms and our hands. And then this time, as you turn on the front leg, let your back heel come up again, hips dropping, bring your foot in, step forwards, plant the foot, or you could do this going backwards as well, of course, and through. So combining it with the step in, thinking about your posture while you're doing this. A lot of your attention on hips, feet, legs, letting your arms follow. I'm going to change direction now. I'm running out of space. And then bring your feet parallel. Shake out. Excellent. Rub your hands together. And then with the pads of your fingers, just lightly tapping over your face. And then move the palms of your hands working up over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Let the other arm hang down until you take it out, and then you go down the inside of your arm and up the outside. On the other side. And your back, so just as much of your back as you can comfortably cover, tapping lightly, especially on the lower back. Around your hips. And outside of your legs coming up the inside. Light again on your belly. And then a little bit stronger on the upper part of your chest. and shake. Okay. So coming back to the original posture that we had, and an exercise called Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain, sinking down, pushing up. Feel your hips already being pulled down, and that seeming to draw your hands in towards your chest, and everything drops down. So we start off a little bit like the wild goose, but then the arms come around, but feel that pull on your hips, and then your shoulders, and then finally let your body yield to that pull. And same thing happens with your thoughts. There's just this feeling of your thoughts beginning to settle as we do this. So yes, we get distracted. Yes, we lose that sense of alignment with the pull of gravity. Inevitably we do. This is quite normal and quite natural. But this exercise in particular, I think, offers us a way back, hence the return to the mountain, which is a lovely image of these qualities of stillness and space and strength that we get from the practice of Tai Chi. One more time. Just stand for a moment, and if it suits you, take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. And open your eyes and shake out. Thank you very much for joining in, everybody.